Mr. President, my parents met when they were graduate students at the University of California, Berkeley in the 1960s, when they were active in the civil rights movement. In fact, my sister and I joke that we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about this thing called justice. I was part of only the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools, almost 2 decades after the United States Supreme Court declared that separate was inherently unequal in the great case of Brown versus Board of Education, a case that I might add was supported by an amicus brief from the then United States Attorney General. In fact, it was the lawyers in Brown v. Board of Education, Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, Constance Baker Motley, that inspired me at a young age to become a lawyer. And simply put, it is likely that had the United States Supreme Court not decided the way it did in Brown versus Board of Education, I would not be standing here as a member of the United States Senate. So then, as a direct beneficiary of landmark rulings by the United States judicial system and the American judicial system, I am acutely aware of the lasting and profound impact that our courts can have on the everyday lives of Americans. And is with a deep sense of respect and admiration for the role of our justice system that I rise to oppose the nomination of Senator Sessions to be the next Attorney General of the United States. The mission of the Department of Justice is clear: to enforce the law and defend the interests of the United States according to the law, to ensure public safety against threats, foreign and domestic, to provide federal leadership in preventing and controlling crime, to seek just punishment for those guilty of unlawful behavior, and to ensure fair and impartial administration of justice for all Americans. And it is those words, justice for all, that best articulate the spirit behind our judicial system. You see, I am a career prosecutor. In fact, I started my work as a young deputy district attorney in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. That office was once led by United States Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren. And every time I filed a case, it would never read the name of the victim versus the name of the defendant. It always read the people versus the defendant. Because in our democracy, in our great judicial system, we have rightly said a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us, especially because we know that harm is most often directed at some of the most vulnerable and voiceless among us. And so we rightly have declared that as a civil society, we will not require them to fight alone. We will stand with them. Justice for all. And this point is what raises my question of whether this nominee can fulfill the role and responsibility of this job. Let's be clear. This is not a debate about a president's nominee. It is not simply a debate about a president's nominee. This is a debate about the fundamental ideals of our country, ideals that date back to the founding of our country and those great words we spoke in 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, rights that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men are created equal, unalienable rights. In other words, President Lincoln was fulfilling the promise first made in the Declaration of Independence, a promise that made clear the basis for legal equality derives not from a right that is given, but from natural rights, rights that have been endowed upon us by our Creator, rights that cannot and should not be taken away or given up. So let us recognize that civil rights are not given through the enactment of a law or the publication of a court decision. Rather, our inherent civil rights are fulfilled when we guarantee them through the implementation and enforcement of the law. Well-meaning people indeed can argue over the best means to ensure our fundamental rights, but it is crucial that we do not allow ourselves to be drawn into a suggestion that enforcing civil rights is favoring one group over another. Protecting civil rights is not about taking care of someone else. It is in our common interest. It is in each of our self-interest. Liberty for each of us depends on liberty for all of us. It is just like the Department of Justice's mission, which articulates in those three words, justice for all. This is the department's charge. It is its mission. And the next Attorney General of the United States must use his powers as a prosecutor to uphold it. And this brings me to the troubling and frankly unacceptable record of the nominee for this office. It is the United States Department of Justice that is charged with enforcing the rights of those trying to cast a ballot. But Senator Sessions cheered the Supreme Court's decision to gut the Voting Rights Act, used his power as a U.S. attorney to prosecute 3 African-American civil rights activists in Alabama, and then called the NAACP, quote, un-American. It is the United States Department of Justice that addresses systemic inequalities that we know, unfortunately, still exist in our criminal justice system and have led to mass incarceration. But Senator Sessions led the opposition to bipartisan sentencing reform. It is the United States Department of Justice that investigates and prosecutes crimes motivated by hate, based on race, religion, gender, nationality, disability, or sexual orientation of its victim. But in the 1990s, when lawmakers worked to pass hate crime legislation after the brutal killing of Matthew Shepard, Senator Sessions was a vocal opponent. It is the United States Department of Justice that uses the power of the prosecutor to protect women who have been victims of crime. But Senator Sessions voted no when both Democrats and Republicans came together to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, which gives support and assistance to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, including members of our LGBT community. It is the United States Department of Justice that defends that most fundamental right of freedom to worship. But it was Senator Sessions who was one of the most outspoken defenders of then-candidate and now President Donald Trump's unconstitutional Muslim travel ban, which, by the way, was roundly denounced by many of his fellow Republicans. It is the United States Department of Justice that enforces federal laws prohibiting employment practices that discriminate on the grounds of race, sex, religion, and national origin. But Senator Sessions has opposed the Paycheck Fairness Act, Lilly Ledbetter Act, and the Employee Non-Discrimination Act. It is the United States Department of Justice that implements the Americans with Disabilities Act. But when both Democrats and Republicans worked to reauthorize the Individuals with Disability in Education Act, which provides resources to children with special needs, Senator Sessions said providing educational services for these children, quote, may be the single most irritating problem for teachers throughout America today. You see, whether you are the father of a special needs child in a classroom, a woman trying to earn fair pay, an African-American man in a voting booth, or a victim at a police station trying to report a crime, Senator Sessions has not been your advocate. As a former United States Attorney General, the great Bobby Kennedy once said, "We must recognize the full human equality of all people, and all our people before God, before the law, and in the councils of government. We must do this not because it is economically advantageous, although it is, not because the laws of God and man command it, although they do command it, not because people in other lands wish it so. We must do it," he said, for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do. The right thing to do. That is what makes us special as a country. That is what makes us right, and that is what makes us great. Our values and our ideals. It is the belief that no matter who you are, whether young or old, rich or poor, gay or straight, whether you're a child from Oakland or a child of Birmingham, whether you came here by plane to escape the hardships of war and torture, or by foot to build a better life, whether you've been the victim of gun violence or opioid addiction, whether you're paid less than others doing the same work or stopped at a red light because of the color of your skin, you deserve an Attorney General who recognizes the full human quality of all people. It's what led Attorney General Herbert Brownell, when there was a rampant voter discrimination and intimidation here in the United States, to create in the United States Department of Justice the Civil Rights Division, whose mission is to, quote, uphold the civil and constitutional rights of all Americans, particularly some of the most vulnerable members of our society. It's what led Attorney General William Rogers, United States Attorney General William Rogers, to forcefully demand the integration of an elementary school at the Redstone Missile Center in Alabama when the children of Black service members were being denied entry. It's that commitment that led Bobby Kennedy to send 500 United States Marshals to Oxford, Mississippi, to escort a young Black man, James Meredith, to enroll at Ole Miss. It's what led United States Attorney General Elliot Richardson to resign rather than do the bidding of a corrupt president during Watergate. It's what led my friend Attorney General Eric Holder to sue the state of Arizona over SB 1070, a law that led to the unjust racial profiling of immigrants, and to say to the United States government would no longer defend a law that prevented LGBT Americans from expressing their love for one another. And it's what led Attorney General Sally Yates on a Monday evening this month to stand up and refuse to defend a Muslim ban. More than most cabinet positions, the United States Attorney General enforces the principles that are the founding of our country. But I've seen no evidence in his record or testimony that Senator Sessions will approach this office in furtherance of these noble ideals. The gains that our country has made are not permanent, and it is incumbent on the Attorney General of the United States to fight for the civil rights of all people. No one said it better than Coretta Scott King. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. And if Senator Sessions won't, then it is incumbent upon the rest of us to persist. I urge my colleagues to vote no. Mr. President, I yield the floor.